Thanks for listening to Creative Control. While I have you here, please consider supporting Youth Empowerment and Support Services, otherwise known as YES. Based in Edmonton, Alberta, YES provides immediate and low-barrier overnight and day shelter, temporary supportive housing, and individualized wraparound supports for young people aged 15 to 24. They work collaboratively within a network of care focused on the prevention of youth homelessness by providing youth with the necessary supports to stabilize their housing, improve their well-being, build life skills, connect with community, and avoid re-entry into homelessness. Learn more about how to donate or otherwise support YES by visiting yess.org.
Hey, this is Adam from Toronto, and I support Creative Control because Vish is full stop one of the best arts interviewers in Canada, or anywhere in the world, really. He approaches every episode like he's known the artist for years, creating a conversational atmosphere that gets straight to the heart of the work. No one else in podcasting gets it quite right like he does, with a mixture of meticulous research, wise artistic insights, and well-humored personal connections. I proudly support Vish and Creative Control on Patreon. You should too.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol today.
Alexis Fleissig and Scott McLeod are each musicians who met when they were kids growing up in Washington, D.C. As a young guitarist, McLeod recruited Fleissig, an aspiring drummer, to form a band, and eventually, along with singer and lyricist Bobby Sullivan and bassist Chris Thompson, they formed a band called Lunch Meat. Thompson was replaced by Johnny Temple, and the solidified quartet worked under the name Soulside, releasing pioneering post-punk EPs and albums on labels like Discord and Sandwich Records between 1986 and 1989 when they split up. All but Sullivan eventually joined Eli Janney to form the more prominent band Girls Against Boys, but Soulside reconvened for special shows beginning in 2017 and in 2020 released a 7-inch of their first new music in some 30 years. On November 18th, 2022, Discord Records brings us a powerful new Soulside album called A Brief Moment in the Sun, which prompted me to connect with Alexis and Scott for a fun and frank talk about things like how I may have brought Hot Snakes back together while interviewing Obits, which was another band Alexis was in, life in Los Angeles and Vienna, respectively, how they each first got into music as fans and players, Keith Moon and The Who, and Iron Maiden's amp falling off of a truck, the rare Lunch Meat split single with the band Mission Impossible, which featured a 17-year-old drummer named Dave Grohl, how the Washington, D.C. music community inspired each other, and Soulside's apparent influence on Fugazi, how Sloan's Patrick Pentland is obsessed with a Soulside song called Other Side, Bobby Sullivan's politically minded lyrics and interest in Rastafarianism, why Soulside is back, and insights about their new album, upcoming tour dates, future plans, and much more. A part of the Entertainment One Network with the support of listeners like you who follow and subscribe to this podcast and spread the word about it, and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/creativecontrol, which is the primary source of revenue for this show, with additional support from Blackbird Music, a well-stocked record store with locations in Edmonton and Calgary, Alberta, and very friendly staff who will happily help you look for whatever it is you need. Say you want to order the new Soulside album, A Brief Moment in the Sun. Well, you head over there to blackbird.ca and you type in what you want, or you email them, or you could call them, and they will help you get that Soulside record and whatever else you need. Again, go to their website to learn more at blackbird.ca. Plus, in-kind support from Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee, respectively, in Guelph, Ontario, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario. This is episode 732 of Creative Control, featuring the lovely and talented Alexis Fleissig and Scott McLeod of Soulside, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hey, Alexis, how's it going?
Hi, Vish. How you doing?
I'm well. It's nice to see you again. It's been a long time. Last time I think we were in the same area. It was probably, I think, in St. John's, Newfoundland, if not somewhere in Ontario, when you were playing in Obitz.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice
with
to
the very
see you
drunk Rick Froberg. Yeah.
He was a little intoxicated. Yes, it's fair to say. There's video footage on the YouTube of Rick having at her. Let's just say that.
And can we say for the record that you're responsible probably for getting Hot Snakes back together?
Well, because of that little conversation we had, I did prompt Rick to challenge John Reese to write new Hot Snake songs, and then that did happen. So, Alexis, thank you. I appreciate the credit.
I think that's my memory. That's where it goes back to you.
They haven't said that out loud to anyone else, so I don't know. But
I think I might have it on video, actually.
It is available. Everyone can find it on YouTube that this happened. But surely they were having their own conversations. It wasn't just me. But I appreciate that and the citation, if you will. I thank you. Thank you, Alexis. That means a lot.
Sure.
Where in the world are you today?
I am in California, Los Angeles.
Oh, nice. You've lived in Los Angeles for some time, have you?
About 4 years now.
Oh, where were you before then?
I was in Texas, moving around a lot. I was in New York, and then in Texas, and then now I'm here in L.A.
Nice. How are things in L.A. going for you there? Living there?
Good. We just need some water. Other than that, it's great.
Water is essential.
Yeah.
It is a thing. If you would like, I can try to arrange an interview with someone and get that done. As you know, I have a history of getting people to do
things happen.
Yeah.
Also, you have water up where you are, right? So maybe you could share some of that.
We do have water in Canada generally and in Alberta for now. It seems to me, as we're speaking, all the people in charge of things are trying to make everyone pay for them a little bit more than they used to. You know, like $8 for something or this or that.
Sure.
So hopefully the water... Well, yeah, water... Man, this is getting serious. That water thing is real. I'm sorry, you're having droughts and stuff? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, we have some serious droughts. But apparently it's everywhere. I mean, everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So.
We're not in good shape. This is a horrible way to begin. I mean, it's a sad way to begin. It's the truth, but it's a hard way to begin.
Now, Scott has some water in Austria, I think.
Yes. Also joining us on the line, Scott, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Nice to meet you, Scott. We've never interacted before, as far as I know. It's very nice to meet you.
It's great to meet you.
Yes. And so Alexa says you're in Austria. Is that true?
Yes, I'm on the line here from Vienna, Austria, where I've lived now for about 13 years already. And I was listening to you guys. We do have water here, but a lot of water, because there's a really big mountain range right near us. I forget what it's called in Austria, but pretty big. And there's a lot of water coming from there, and but it is getting low. Even the Danube this year got so low that actually it uncovered some like shuttle ships from World War II that were underwater and hadn't been seen in 40 years or something.
Yes, I saw photos of that. Some of that were like Nazi ships, weren't they, that were surfacing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were scuttled. I guess it had been boats that were scuttled, meaning they were sunk. And they just been sitting there in a graveyard for a long time, and then there they are again. So the water thing is serious. It's everywhere.
So I live in Edmonton, Alberta, and when we moved here, we thought, and in terms of climate stuff, it shouldn't be so bad. We're inland, we're not near the oceans. Mm-hmm. And then in the last couple of years, I saw footage of Italy, and you're saying you got mountain ranges there. Turns out the ice and the snow on top of the mountains is melting and flowing down the mountain and creating flooding. And I didn't even think of that. So I live, where I live, it's not right near us, but you're not too far from the mountains. And I'm now a little nervous about that. So I'm just a nervous Nelly. And water, you've got no water or you got too much water. Water is a problem. Is that what we're learning, Scott?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, and you're right. Over here in Europe, there's been a lot of flooding in cities. Prague had a lot of issues with that. In Vienna, actually, they did something right, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago when they were planning. There's a lot of sort of spillage land, which is parks and stuff like that, swimming areas. It's off the Danube.
Yeah.
And that planning every turned out well. So there's not much flooding in central Vienna, but you're right. I mean, it's difficult to manage in a lot of European cities.
Yeah, it's a scary, scary time. But this, again, is not meant to be a scary, scary interview. It's meant to be a joyous interview, one about something to celebrate here, the return of something. So I want to get in. I want to get into that. I alluded when I was chatting with Alexis there. I alluded to one of his other bands that I got to see a number of times, Obits. Scott, just for the record, what are some other projects beyond Soulside, which we're going to discuss today? What are some of the bands you've been in some cases with Alexis, I'm gathering, but can you talk about some of the projects you've been involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. After Soulside existed in the mid to late 80s, and then we stopped playing around 1990. And Alexis and I and Johnny from Soulside joined our friend Eli to form the band Girls Against Boys that we then played with through the 90s up into the early aughts, or as you have it. And we still play occasionally. We had about a 10-year strong run, and then we still played occasionally after that. But there's Girls Against Boys, and I even played another group with Alexis that's more European-based called Paramount Styles. Mm-hmm. More of an acoustic kind of electroacoustic type group. And those are the ones that are coming to mind now. But there's been a lot.
No, that's fair. The last time I got to see Girls Against Boys, I believe, was at the Touch and Go anniversary party. Does that make sense? 2006 or something like that?
Makes sense.
6, yeah.
Yeah. It was in Chicago, in a parking lot by the Hideout. Yeah. That was great. No, it was nice to see you guys. That was a very monumental few days for me that I got to see, and just wanted to say it's nice to have you on the show. And thanks for all the work you've done in the music and the arts and the culture. Yeah, both of you guys. Now, great, Alexis, similar question. Yeah, no, it's lovely to have you. Alexis, just to follow up, Scott mentions a few of the projects you've been in together. I mentioned Obits. Anything else you want to shout out right now before we move on in terms of other?
I occasionally play with ex-Obits members, Savak, which is a really great band.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I also play in Bellini, which is Italian-Sicilian band with Agostino and Giovanna, who are known to many, I think, but they were in a band called Uzeda. And anyway, Bellini we've been not active for a while, but we played for many, many years.
Yeah. I loved Uzeda, if I may. Loved all the Uzeda records. That Uzeda is long gone, is that correct?
No, they just put out a record... I think it was before the pandemic. But
okay.
They put out a record
3
years ago, I think.
And they still play. It's very Agostino style. It's like they kind of announce a show 3 weeks before it happens. They're like, we're playing now.
Yeah, they just played like 3 shows in, I think it was this year.
Nice. I feel out of the loop. I guess I've missed it. I get like Uzeda used to put out records, I believe, on Touch and Go. I think that's probably where.
Yes, that's right.
I think.
Was it Touch and Go or was it?
I think this new one. God, I think it might have been on Temporary Residence, possibly.
Yeah, that's just it. When Touch and Go I've lost track of Touch and Go. For those who don't know, is really, really, really slowed down in terms of releases. And to my knowledge, I've gotten some Dirty 3 reissues from them and Slint things and new Shellac albums, but it's pretty quiet. But in any case, I've lost. You know what? You've prompted me. I'm going to start Googling Uzeda music and finding it again because I used to just love listening to their records. Anyway,
yeah, their new record's really cool.
And so in Canada, by the way, the name Bellini has a different connotation because of the Kids in the Hall. One of the auxiliary troupe members is Paul Bellini. Are you familiar with the Kids in the Hall, Alexis, at all?
Oh yeah, I love that.
You know the guy in the towel, the naked. That's Paul Bellini. That's Paul Bellini. So when I hear Bellini, I think of Paul Bellini. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, it's very lovely to have you both on the show, and you've got this long history. And so before we get into this wonderful new record, A Brief Moment in the Sun, I want to get into a little bit of your dynamics, your history together. I hope that will lead us into figuring out how things like Lunch Meat or Soulside and all the other things have sort of come about. Scott, do you have any sort of memory of when you first encountered Alexis, and where was it? What was the context?
I do. It was in junior high school, actually, so a long time ago. And I was very nerdy when I came into junior high school. For the first year, I didn't have many friends, but I saw what I thought were the cool people. They would play ultimate frisbee and stuff like that. Alexis was one of the cool people. It took me till around 8th grade. I remember I finally played ultimate frisbee with the cool people in the yard there, and then I hung out with everybody on the hill, and I was like, man, cool. I have friends now, and one of them was Alexis. I played guitar, he played drums. We started really early on, around that time, jamming in our different basements, playing classic rock covers, really Who covers, Led Zeppelin stuff, and that's where I met him. And in a way, after about a year of that, we met Bobby Sullivan and Chris Thompson.
Yeah.
In high school at this point, and formed our first punk band called Lunch Meat.
Right. Now this is all in Washington, D.C., I'm gathering?
Yeah, it's all in Washington.
Okay, just want to clarify that. Alexis, do you wish to affirm or rebut any part of the historical record that Scott has just cited?
No, that is. I believe that is correct. I would check my records, but I met Scott in junior high school, and he was from a different elementary school, which was a huge problem. You come from different elementary schools. But we would play all the time. We would. I first learned to play drums when I went to a party at his house, and somebody had a drum set in his attic, and I was smitten by the drum set. So then we would play very, very poorly for years, consistently playing the Who Substitute, which, Scott, I just saw the Who at Hollywood Bowl 2 days ago.
You're kidding.
For the first time, I finally saw them. So full circle.
Wow.
Of course, they didn't play Substitute.
They did not play Substitute, no.
Oh, see.
Now,
you were probably out there with a big banner trying Substitute.
Yeah, come on, Substitute.
Scott, why did you speculate that they did not play one of their biggest hit songs, Substitute? How did you know that?
I guess I must be clairvoyant when it comes to the Who. No, I don't know why. I just figured that song is probably not grandiose enough now for like a huge arena setting. It probably doesn't like fit as well as only Teenage Wasteland. That's going to work everywhere. It's going to work in a huge
I guess Bob O'Reilly would work. Alexis, did they play any early stuff at all? Did they play they probably played My Generation or something?
Nope, they didn't play that.
Wow.
They played. They went from Tommy to Quadrophenia. They did some Who's Next stuff and some. What's that record? By Numbers? Is it not by Numbers?
Yeah, the Who by Numbers.
The one with the one that was like after Who's Next. I think the first one without Keith Moon.
Oh right, yeah.
What's that one called?
I grew up loving the Who, and then I don't know what happened. I feel like the Who started to get short shrift among some people as being something not as great as we thought. I thought they were amazing as a kid, like just watching the footage and hearing the drums. I'm a drummer as well, so I think of Keith Moon. That's when I started to feel more like liberated, when I would just try to do more fills. Something about it. I just felt like,
it's important to do as many fills as possible.
Well, I mean, then you're like, am I just showboating? Is this really helping the song? What am I doing this? Like, because he just was all over the place in so many ways. But it was pretty, when you could figure out how to do some of that stuff, I found that very liberating I can't play like Keith Moon, but I can kind of do it. So I don't know if you had that, Alexis.
I used to practice to Who's Next all the time, and it took me years to realize that maybe I didn't need to do a fill on every measure and every bar.
Yes.
Have you finally figured that out, Alex?
No, I still haven't. I'm still learning it.
It's absolutely true, though. There's a bunch of drummers out there that are clearly like, that must be okay. That guy did it, Keith Moon. So I'm just going to fill all over.
And he
this.
didn't even do it in time. No, it was okay.
I know. So, somehow it worked, but it's really a lightning in a bottle there, I think, because the rest of us are trying to do it, and your whole other band's like, we're way off now. Thanks a lot. Glad you got to do that, Phil. Great.
And you're like, but Keith Moon did it, and you're like, but you're not Keith Moon. Well, but I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay, so Scott, Alexis mentions the drums at a part or at an attic at a party. That's weird. I have a sense memory of that too. Going to a party in like grade 8, and this kid Stuart had his drum kit set up, and I tried it, and that's the first inkling where I'm like, oh, I can kind of do this. Scott, do you have an inkling of when playing guitar sort of entered your mind as a possibility for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was around the time for a while, I played like Little League sports and things like that. I remember pretty clearly there was a sudden shift. It was just getting into rock music in those early preteen, teenage years. It was like I was the kid, like many of us, stay up late at night, my covers over my head, listening to DC 101, a classic rock station in Washington, D.C. And This is before I knew that Led Zeppelin was a band and not the name of a person. I wasn't sure. You just kind of listening and fascinated with this stuff, and that kind of went from, to be honest, like probably jumping around my room using a tennis racket as a fake guitar.
Oh, that's what I did.
Like I did probably stuff like REO Speedwagon, things like that, because all those songs were like REO Speedwagon was really geared towards preteen kids. I mean, when you think about it, it's all the love songs are kind of so ridiculous almost that they're almost creepy in a weird way.
Yeah.
They really kind of resonated with like this young kid's mind of like, what is a romance? What are these things that they're singing about? And so I would jump around doing that. And that kind of actually led towards maybe I should learn how to play guitar, which I did. And I started out, I had a few years of lessons, or maybe not even a few years, maybe a full year, where I learned, Rolling Stones songs. I had a really good teacher. I forget his name, who was up near our high school in Washington, D.C. And I learned kind of some of the basics, some AC/DC stuff, who I love, the Rolling Stones. Yeah, a whole bunch, Led Zeppelin, a whole bunch of things. So I kind of had like a collection of riffs, basically.
Yeah.
And my house in D.C. was where our bands, even lunch meet later, and Soulside and everything, we practice in my parents' basement.
I see.
Not exclusively, but much of the time. And so that house, my parents were kind of ultra liberal, very open. We had a pretty open house, so they didn't mind the punk rock kids coming over, going to the basement. Yeah. My mom would tease them about their dyed hair and stuff like that. And they, thank you, Mrs. McLeod. My mom
That's a Chris Thompson reference.
Yeah, my mom made me. Well, Bobby was the best. Bobby came over one day with like his hair totally bleached blonde, and my mother was like, "Oh, Bobby, I love what you did with your hair." And Bobby said, "Well, my mom made me do it."
Oh, wow!
It's just our house was that kind of house. So
Scott's parents were incredibly supportive. Well, I think most of the rest of our parents were sort of like, when is this going to be over? His parents were very, very supportive.
I pick up on that, and I appreciate that. I also did the same thing as you, Scott. My dad had records, and they weren't like amazing records. He had like I brought them with me to Edmonton, like a Dean Martin Christmas record I would put on, and I would get a tennis racket, and I would pretend to sing along and put on a little show for them. And they would look, at me with smiles on their face. And I'm not kidding. Within weeks, I had tennis lessons. I clearly wanted to play guitar, and they misunderstood. And I was like, I'm like, where are we going?
Wow, he really loves tennis.
6 o'clock. It's 7 a.m. Where are we going? And they're like, oh, we signed you up we saw what you were doing there. Put you in tennis lessons, son. I'm like, what? That's not what I wanted at all.
I don't want to play tennis.
Yeah.
I don't want to play tennis. I want to play rock.
It was so restrictive for me that the first secondhand drum kit I bought, I told my parents I borrowed it. Like I brought it home. My friends and I brought it home in our whatever car we ended up having at 16, 17 years old. And I just, it's my friend Ted's. This is Ted's drum kit. It's just going to stay here for several years. And they were like, okay, as long as it's not yours. You never really finished those tennis lessons we signed you up for, so... Anyway, sorry guys. I'm just telling you, it's great to have supportive parents. So
no, it's great.
And I love this story because you guys have been childhood friends, and you've still made music. You alluded to the fact, or rather, Scott did. Soulside ended in 1990, roughly. Can we talk a little bit about what was going on in DC at the time? Because for me, as someone who's studied and really in love with sort of the Discord Records sort of scene, the DC community, I have a sense of what was going on around the time Soulside was coming about. Alexis, in your memory, was something going on in the community in any sort of galvanized way that inspired the sound and approach of, I guess, both Lunch Meat and then eventually Soulside? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think that there are documentaries ad nauseum at this point on the Discord DC scene. But for me, growing up, I was a classic rock kid, and then listening to, like Scott, listening to Led Zeppelin and discovering that Led Zeppelin is actually not the name of a person. But when Scott came to me one time, he was like, we're going to start a band, listen to this tape. And the tape was full of Minor Threat and Scream and Marginal Man and all this music that I'd never heard of because I was always listening to, the radio.
Yes, yeah.
And it was like a lightning bolt to hear, especially hear Minor Threat and Scream and Marginal Man and then all these British punk bands from, like whatever, the Sex Pistols and Wire and stuff like that. Just stuff that I had never heard. And this would have been in, 83 or something like that? And then we just started going to shows. We would go to shows together down in D.C. and all of a sudden you discover there's this whole community of bands that it was really a unique experience to have all these bands and friends who are all in the bands and super supportive. And I think now it seems like an incredibly rare thing, but at the time it was just this community of people that whenever you played, people would come see you, and even if you were terrible, for the most part, people would come and see you, and it was just really supportive and really fun, and also I think there was this real excitement about the idea of having a band and then writing some songs. There's this whole goal thing where we would write songs and then we would go into a studio. That was incredible, and then we would play. We would play at these two clubs, DC Space and 930 Club. So to play DC Space was amazing, but then to play 930 Club was like incredible, and then to go on tour was incredible. So there are all these like steps that we would take that were really, really exciting and new for us,
Yeah, Alexis alluded to, for those listening, Alexis alluded to some documentaries. Certainly Salad Days, Punk the Capital come to mind. I really enjoyed that Punk the Capital one that came out a couple of years ago, if I might say. However, what I want to go back to for just a moment, Alexis, is you had this tape that did you say Scott gave you this tape with all these bands on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I assume the answer is obvious. Was it meaningful for you, Alexis, to discover that a lot of the bands were from your city? It wasn't just those British punk bands. Was that inspiring in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think also the thing that we found about touring and there, there are all these fanzines and everything, was that there's this whole network of people out there. And so, 7 Punk obviously is fairly different from the DC thing, but to know that there's these movements all over the world was like finding this sort of like secret code or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to know that they were also, just like blocks away from us, like, Ian lives, like I lived in Georgetown for a little while or in Burleith and Ian lived like right up the street from me. I'm like, what? He lives right, that's incredible.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you're talking about is that what seemed like small little communities had this global interconnectedness that you would discover through zines at the time. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Scott, it sounds like from the way I just heard the story, you were the one saying, Alexis, we're going to be in a band together. You took on a little bit of a leadership role in trying to get people together in, let's say, lunch meet. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, my thing was kind of, I had a bunch of friends in high school that were older than me at the time. This little kind of crew that would go to parties and stuff, and they all kind of graduated, and I was I played in this little band with them called Birds of Prey before that. So we had like this kind of high school party band kind of thing.
They were good.
Classic rock covers. Yeah, classic rock covers. And so we enjoyed doing that, but they all graduated from high school, and I knew Alexis and we jammed together. And I remember it was a beginning of a new year. I think it might have been my senior year in high school or something.
Yeah.
I didn't have as many friends. And I knew these two kids in the school, Bobby Sullivan and Chris Thompson. They looked kind of like punk kids. So I remember the opening, ceremony of school, I sat right next to them. I said, hey, you guys, why don't we make a band together? I play guitar. I mean, people in high school knew I played guitar because our band, Birds of Prey, would play in the high school.
Oh, nice.
A couple times. And they were like kind of looking at me like, I don't know. I don't know. Because I was like a classic rock guy. They didn't. And so, but we just tried it out. And they're the ones that gave me the tape that I probably would have given.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Alexis.
I see.
Because Bobby's brother, Mark Sullivan, had been deeply involved in the really early punk rock scene in DC, one of the earliest bands. And so Bobby was really the kind of the conduit, I think, for all of us to learn more about the scene that was happening locally. Like you said, it's a really good point. It's a totally different thing for a kid to be looking at a concert of Ozzy Osbourne or something and thinking, wow, I'd like to play rock music, but it's so unapproachable and so far, far away.
Yeah.
To go see this happening in your own city was just mind-blowing. I remember Bobby took me to my first punk rock show, which was Scream. And it was in 930 Club, and I was just blown away because this was back when, for a classic rock cover band, writing an original song was a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was seeing a band that was all original songs. It was like, wow, so it blew my mind too. So I would not say I was a leader. I was more like, just let's do something together. Let's just try to make this work.
Yeah.
I think there was another transformative thing, which was that you could be bad at your instrument and it was still cool. Like you could do really cool stuff by just hitting an E string or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then we started being really, I think there was also this big frowning moment that we all had this sort of epiphany about how guitar solos and drum solos and all this stuff was just extraneous and unnecessary.
Yeah.
That it was just showing off, and it was like it became this whole punk rock thing versus this sort of glam rock thing, I think, where it was like about the emotion and the direct connection as opposed to just showing off your virtuosity,
I think what we're all talking about a little bit is sort of the humanization of this music, because I grew up, I've told this sort of story a number of times on this show, that I grew up, my cousin played me the Beatles when I was maybe 6 years old or something like that, and I got hooked. And when I got hooked on the Beatles, I would, it wasn't just the music, because they were the Beatles, there were multiple books and documentaries, so I delved all in. And one of the epiphanies I had was I was reading this book about the Beatles as a kid, and it said that they were on a tour in Scandinavia or something, and Ringo had a stomach ache and couldn't play, so they had to get someone to sub for him. And I was like, these superheroes get sick? How is this? I thought these were gods. Like, how could they even have any mortal concerns, you know? And so I think punk rock for me, that was an epiphany. But then these are just people. Like, they're just people. I knew they were, but you know what I mean? Like, you're listening to classic rock radio and you're trying to figure out if Led Zeppelin's a person or a band. Like, there's something alien about them. They seem like they're from another planet. Like, you couldn't possibly do it. Then you go see Scream. Then you get a tape like that. Then you start seeing shows. You're like, wait a minute. I can do this. Like, did you have that a little bit?
Absolutely. I would say it's even more than that. It's almost like an indoctrination. Once you're into it and start getting into it, it kind of evaporates everything else. I mean, you're not thinking anymore about, you're a lot of the music that was happening in the mainstream in the late 80s for us when we were doing Soulside and stuff like that. Sure, it was on our periphery. We even listened to it. Sure, we listened to U2 and different things, but this wasn't what we were really interested in.
Yeah.
What we were really interested in was what was happening on our level in the independent music scene. It just totally takes over your life. It's not just a thing that's like, oh, I kind of jam with my friends once in a while. It's like it changes your whole perspective on everything.
Yeah. I think you can really see it still today everywhere with different scenes where people are like, this is our scene. Like, we made this is our kind of thing. And it's super energizing to be part of something that you think is super special and just your own. You see a lot of kids do that now, which is really cool. So,
So it sounds like various aspects of what was going on rather in DC and within, let's say, the Discord milieu inspired you guys. Can we talk a little bit about Lunch Meat? Lunch Meat wasn't around as Lunch Meat for very long. Scott, is there just the one Lunch Meat release at this point? I don't think that's nothing else is going to happen with Lunch Meat at this point. I don't think. I'm sorry.
We actually there are some unreleased tracks. That
are there? Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned it because we're doing a huge reunion next year.
Box set. Yeah.
Lunch Meat. It's got to come in a lunch box, I would think. The Lunch Meat box set. Yeah. No, sorry.
Not happy. It's very expensive packaging.
Sorry, Scott. Am I correct? There weren't very many official Lunch Meat releases. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, this was the very first band. So the name kind of just happened as whatever the name of the band is. We didn't think that. We were just kind of trying to hobble together some songs basically this one summer or this one school year before we were graduating from high school and stuff. And we did record, I don't know, a bunch of songs, and only a few of them came out on a split 7-inch. And then we would follow the paths that in our whatever city or community we were kind of meant to do, like, okay, going to college or trying to go to college, trying to do that thing.
Yeah.
And we kind of did that, but the pull of the music scene in DC was so strong that every summer not even every summer, every holiday break was like coming home. What shows are happening? Jamming together again, playing a show or whatever. And even you know how time is when you're young. Even between the first summer and the summer of '86 or whatever, we changed the name of the band. We were getting more serious about the band, so we were like, okay, Lunch Meat, we don't like the name that much. Let's change it to Soulside. It just sounds better to us. And we just started every step of the way. It was kind of incremental in these breaks that we'd take to go to school or whatever. Some of us would take time, you know, not go to school, whatever. But they were band breaks, and every time we got back together, we'd be going one step further in our seriousness about how we wanted to deal with it.
Yeah.
Didn't we put out the first record but change the name because Chris quit the band, or am I misremembering that?
No, because Chris was in Soulside in the beginning.
Oh, he was. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, Chris was in Soulside.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't Lunch Meat. It was actually Chris's idea to make Soulside, or I'm not sure whose idea it was, but I remember we did one Soulside record, and then it was later on that Chris Thompson and I actually ended up going to the same University of Colorado at Boulder. I don't know what in his case, but in my case, I had, speaking of being in a classic rock party high school band, I had pretty abysmal grades. So I couldn't go to some fancy school. The only it's a public school, public university. It was really good education. Actually, I learned a lot there.
Yeah.
But it was also such a different place. I think Chris didn't really want to hang out there in Colorado too long. He came back sooner, and he ended up joining another band called Ignition from the scene. So it was the kind of thing. But it was like we're still going forward. So that next summer when Chris left the band, we got Johnny Temple to join on bass, and we just kept going. I mean, it was right where we left off. You know, we had a lot of momentum. We were serious about what we were doing.
Yeah. Before we move on to this period, I just want to ask one quick question. Alexis, that's Lunch Meat split 7-inch was with a band called Mission Impossible. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, we did a split 7-inch with Mission Impossible, which had 2 releases, actually. So we reissued it with a different cover. I'm not sure why we did that.
Right.
But it's pretty cool. It's I think it's 500 copies of each or 1,000 copies of each or something like that. And Mission Impossible was a fantastic band. And of course, their drummer was Dave Grohl. But I mean, he was a remarkable drummer. I remember watching him in his ascent when he got into Scream. We were like, "Oh, he made it! He's in Scream now," you know. And but he was incredible to watch. But Mission Impossible was just a great band. They were really, really cool. Like they were. I don't know if you ever heard this Alive and Kicking 7-inch, or is that? Are they? Yeah, they're on that. They have a bunch of. They were a great band. So
I have to do some research on Mission Impossible. I don't know if I encountered them in my youth or something, and then they've escaped my brain, my mind. But I was intrigued to recollect that Dave Grohl was in that band, and you guys that's got to be one of his earliest appearances on record, I would think, and I imagine that makes the 7-inch hard to find or valuable, if you will.
Yeah, it is. I have one. Yeah. I was looking it up a few years ago. It's definitely ridiculous enough. It's for what it is. I mean, it's a Xerox paper cover in a plastic bag. You know, the thing, which is. But also, we were learning all those things too with that first 7-inch and those early records. We were learning more. I mean, this was more than. It was like we didn't send our stuff to a big company and they make the record back to us. This was like we're actually physically making our own. I mean, we didn't press it ourselves, but all the artwork we're getting together to have pizzas and insert the inserts and put all the stuff together, and then we'd sell it. You know, so each piece that we had seemed to us at that time as just so unbelievably important. You have 500 copies of a record that you're on. You know, it's just felt amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. Maybe Alexis, you would know. Was the 7-inch on Sandwich Records, Amanda McKay's label, or is that wrong?
I think it's a half release, right? Half Sandwich, half Discord. Is that
that one? Okay.
Or that was the first record?
That was the first record. Yeah. Sorry if I'm misspeaking.
Maybe
Scott.
the first. You're right. The 7-inch is just Sandwich.
Sandwich.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
And again, that was Amanda McKay's record label, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was Amanda and Eli, actually.
Oh, Eli Janik.
Oh, was it? I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. All right.
I never knew that.
I see. We're learning things.
I thought it was Amanda and Eli doing it.
We have to fact check. I suspected this would happen as soon as we started the call. We have to fact check everything Alexis says. It might be a little blurry. No. I trust you, Alexis. I think that's probably true.
That was when Scott was playing with Ozzy Osbourne. Remember that, Scott?
Right. Don't watch. Do not watch Alexis's YouTube channel. There's nothing in it that's true. Nothing in it that's true.
You didn't collaborate with the Ozzy Osbourne, did you, Scott? Somehow did that happen? Who knows?
No, it was Randy. It was only Randy Rhoads.
Okay, just making sure. Just making sure. Now,
I will say, just as a weird connection, that Scott's amp for Soulside. He had a dual Marshall, like a 2-cabinet Marshall with a JCM 800 head, and one of the cabinets apparently fell off the truck of, was it Judas Priest, Scott, or
Def
Iron
Leppard?
Maiden? Def Leppard? Oh no,
Wow.
I thought it was Iron Maiden.
I think it's Iron. Sorry, it was Iron Maiden. Yeah.
Yeah, Iron Maiden.
what do you mean?
Fell off the
So
truck.
that thing sounded. That still sounds great. The thing is
Sorry.
Iron Maiden's amp.
I don't understand. How could it fall off a truck? How you got to tell us. It fell off a truck, and then how did you end up with it? Were you trailing the truck? Was
No,
this?
I think this was just someone's sales. I went to a shop and it was someone's sales pitch to me as a kid. You know, they were like, "You should buy this amp." I was like, checking it out. Well, I don't know. Like, it's an Iron Maiden amp. You should really buy it. I was like, even at the time, I was like, that doesn't change anything.
Weird.
I mean, but anyway, yeah, I would have that a lot when you're buying equipment. People would say, this amp's been over to Europe or whatever. You're like, so is that supposed to make it better? Or
I would think if someone tells you this amp belonged to Iron Maiden, it's $1,000. You go, really? And what's the history? They're like, well, it fell off a truck, and then you say, all right, if it fell off a truck, I'll give you $300. Then I don't want to give you $1,000 for an amp that fell off a truck. That would be my.
Well, that is what I did.
Okay,
that is what I did. I got a low, I got a lower price, but yeah, I guess what I kind of figured was that something had happened with Iron Maiden, and a big band like that. I guess they were on tour. Instead of even checking stuff out, they just got a whole new backline.
I see.
Or,
okay.
And so they had all this stuff. It's kind of like refurbished or something.
Right.
It sounded fine.
Refurbished.
It sounds great.
Fell off a truck. Refurbished is a different kind of refurbishment, I think. But whatever, that's fine. We haven't because he's not here. I'm curious about your guys' perspective on Bobby as a singer and a lyricist. Let's talk about that a little bit in terms of whether or not you guys had any conversations together about maybe what this band was going to convey lyrically. Because often the singer and the lyrics and they're what kind of the band stands for beyond all the music, I would say, on some level. I don't think what I'm saying is that controversial. Alexis, what is your perspective on Bobby's writing and performance? Let's go back to the beginning in that time period when Soulside was active. And then I hope by doing this, we can come full circle to this great new record. Can you characterize Bobby as a lead vocalist and lyricist in your band?
Sure. It's one of those things when we started, like Bobby hadn't sung. Did Bobby sing anywhere else, Scott? Was he like in a choir or something like that? Or
I think he wasn't. I think he was in a choir. So I think that's why he was kind of elected to be the singer because he had some singing experience.
I think at that point we all were starting basically from zero. Like I was a terrible drummer. Scott was a pretty good guitar player.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
I mean, you're pretty good.
Old wounds, because resurfacing here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause any problems.
Scott probably learned most of his guitar from that drug dealer I brought home from Mazda Gallery. That's an inside joke.
I realized that because I realized that because I didn't get it, but that's fine. That's fine. No, I get it. Sorry, Chris, you were saying?
Chris was, he was a bass player. We were all basically learning as we were going, which was great. So, and Scott and Bobby was, I think at that time we were all very politically motivated, and we're all children of government employees, and DC is a very political city. And so that was a lot of our motivation, and I think Bobby really got into that really well. I think he was dealing with. We were all dealing with various issues, like not dealing with them directly, but thinking about them. Was apartheid at the time. There was veganism or vegetarianism. There was inequality in cities and everywhere, and so Bobby, I think, really was able to encapsulate that really well in his lyrics, and also just growing up and changing, going through changes and everything as a 17-year-old and 18-year-old. And I think Chris wrote some lyrics too, which were also very cool.
Yeah.
And Scott did too. So everybody sort of contributed. But Bobby was great, and he was a really fun frontman. I mean, we were all very very slender at the time, so we were all able to take our shirts off immediately when we played and show off our Adonis-like physiques. And
that's important for a young person to be able to feel confident doing that, I suppose. Yeah, that's fair.
No, we still do that.
No, you should. Why not? Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly true. Scott, similar kind of question. What's your take on Bobby as a lead voice, if you will, in the work you did together as in Soulside and continue to do together?
Like Alexis said, I think that for Bobby and for all of us, I kind of felt like I watched Bobby kind of, we watched each other grow up in the punk rock scene. So I think that in the beginning, we were younger teenagers and it was just like playing and fun and everything. And as this was the 80s. So this was like Reaganomics. This was also, mutual assured destruction. This was nukes. This was like this thing. And as you're in the punk rock scene, you also seeing that a lot of the music in those scenes is addressing some of these things, or at least talking about these issues. And I remember seeing Bobby and all of us getting like galvanized into a lot of these issues as we were getting more and more deeply involved in the punk rock scene in DC and in touring. We started touring a lot more in the United States, playing at Gilman Street in San Francisco, a lot of these different scenes. And back then, each scene kind of had almost sometimes it's different flavor of punk rock in a way. There was like a Chicago kind of sound, it was kind of Berkeley thing.
Yeah.
And so there was all these ideas floating around. And I kind of watched Bobby and all of us, but Bobby in particular, as he's the lead singer, I watched his like lyrics really mature, basically quite rapidly, into really wanting to have music that had a kind of social message in the music, and it became very important for him very quickly.
When did I know? From what I understand, Bobby became immersed in Rastafarianism. I believe that's the case. He's published a book, in fact, about his experiences and perspectives on that, as I recall. Alexis, was that prominent in the early part of this band, or did that come later?
I think Johnny and Bobby used to work at Ross Records in DC, which was that was Dr. No's label, right, Scott?
I don't remember whose label it was, but it was a reggae label.
It was a reggae label, so they were pretty heavily into the reggae scene, and they actually met a lot of the artists because they would come, with their records, they would come tour and stuff like that. So they were pretty into that scene from pretty much in the beginning, I think.
Yeah.
So not just the music, philosophically, socioculturally, like there are references to it on the new album, for sure. And so I wonder if you pick up. Sorry, where I'm coming from is I just had a band on the show. A long-running band from Canada called Sloan. And one of the members of Sloan, Patrick Pentland, has become somewhat fixated on a Soulside song called Other Side. And he references this concept, what he views as a concept, frequently. He's got a song called Other Side. There's at least two songs on the latest Sloan album that reference this other side idea. This is a bit vague, and I apologize to put you on the spot and focus on one potentially random song from your past.
Yeah.
But does that song stick out for you guys in any particular way? Because I've been fascinated by Patrick's, like, that's the song. Like, this is the song that has impacted me. Does that resonate with you in any way?
It does. I mean, I think for Soulside, the song Other Side was one of our, I'd say before the Hot Bodygram record. That kind of changed everything. But Other Side kind of represented one of the standout tracks that we had in terms of its meaning and everything. Bobby's lyrical stuff that was, as I said, getting more and more, mature, more and more interesting as we all were in the playing and stuff. That song really kind of pulled everything together that Soulside had as a band, like as a full package. I think that was kind of a demonstration of like this is what Soulside sounds like.
In terms of its sort of,
now that kind of,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in terms of its lyrical meaning. Is there anything you could say?
Lyrics and the music. I mean, I find The Other Side. It's kind of I suppose some of the lyrics, maybe you'd say it's even like an early emo type thing, or it's kind of relates to that a little bit. But there's a funkierness to it that also is kind of leaning in a kind of Fugazi-ish direction. It's coming at some point, which we played with a lot, kind of funky drums instead of just punk rock drums. Like we were never a hardcore band in like the hardcore musical form.
Yeah.
We toured that circuit, but we were kind of just a punk or post-punk kind of band that hardcore we kind of touched a little bit, but we weren't really a hardcore band. And I think Other Side kind of demonstrates that. It's a punky song, but it's got some funkiness and some breaks, and it's kind of like one of Bobby's standout songs, like, you know, about breaking through these social barriers and boundaries that he has seen and that he has now continued to study throughout his life. So it's kind of fascinating. And it also alludes back to the time we were growing up in D.C. This thing is racial segregation, so many things happening in D.C., the crack epidemic, so many things that were like, you know, find the other side of your life, I guess. And I think that song was just a powerful.
Yeah, it seems to. I appreciate that context for it. And like I say, it's still resonating with at least one person I've had on the show recently. Alexis, did you have any take on that particular song or Bobby's mentality at the time? Also, I will say, like, yeah, I feel like you guys seem to me anyway to have been ahead of the curve with this sort of amalgam of funk and reggae and punk that a lot of us, the early Fugazi period, seems to have been influenced by that as well. So I don't know if you were crediting me earlier for the Hot Snake stuff. I don't want to put too much on you here, but do you feel like Soulside was starting to impact the work of peers like Fugazi or anything like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
because
think,
oh, you're talking about
no, it's okay, Scott. We've got an emphatic absolutely from Scott. So this is
okay. I was just going to tell you absolutely, because back to the neighborhood thing. My parents' basement was on Posada Street in Washington, D.C. and Northwest, and Guy Picciotto lived just catty corner to me in his house. So Soulside would practice in our basement, and Fugazi would sometimes practice in his basement. And I know those guys were sneaking over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were. I remember looking in the bushes, and there was like Guy and Brendan in the bushes, like listening and writing, taking notes and stuff. Yeah. but I do think, like when we played, apparently, we played Chevy Chase Community Center a few times, which was a great place to play in DC. It was like this, you know, community center, and I think that Brian Baker came and saw us, and he was like, "I could do that." And I think we were inspiring for Dag Nasty. At least that's the story I heard.
Yeah. No.
Really, that's cool.
I can hear it. Is all I'm getting at. The more I've been obviously more rather immersed in Soulside's world in the lead up to this conversation, and I'm like, oh yeah, just based on the chronology, I'm like, okay, I can see how. Again, I view Discord, and I just had this conversation with Alec Mackay recently on the show, where I'm like, it's the Discord thing is unbelievable to me, because it does seem like you can hear how people were influencing each other in their bands. You can hear how eras, like sounds are particular to particular eras, but everyone was kind of trying to figure out their own lane with an approach or a sound or things they want to talk about. So I would say, and I don't know how you two feel about this, that perhaps Soulside is a key, if unheralded, focal point for what came after. And that's what I'm getting at. I just want to say that even hearing how Bobby sings, his approach to things, the way you guys play together, I hear it. That's all I'm getting at. I don't mean to overflatter you. I don't mean to say anything ahistorical or wrong, but I feel like this is probably the truth. We've already got an emphatic absolutely from Scott. Alexis, will you go on the record and take credit for the achievements of Soulside on this podcast?
For our own achievements?
Yes.
I will go on record and say that Soulside achieved what we achieved, absolutely. But in terms of influencing other bands, I mean, I hope we did. I know that we were very influenced by other bands, and I think we did influence other bands. But the things that we were listening to, and I think a lot of people were listening to, but maybe we took them in a certain way, was, you know, that Bobby and Johnny were really into reggae. I mean, I think we all liked reggae a lot. I was really into rap. We were also listening to a lot of DC Go-Go was a big thing, and then of course hardcore and then 77 punk stuff was all kind of in this soup that we were all listening to. You know, I think Wire was a hugely important band for everybody in DC. Yeah. So that was a big influence.
You can hear that. I guess that would be considered what, post-punk, if you want to go by a genre signifier. But DC Go-Go, for those who don't know, Alexis, that is some amalgam of funk and soul and sort of party, like some sort of exuberant music. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, and I think it's uniquely DC.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Thing.
And you could see all of the hardcore, post-hardcore bands start to adopt aspects of DC Go-Go in their live shows in particular. If I think on it, the energy level seems to have come up, and it seemed to be more inclusive. Like it's not. Sorry, some of the Discord, the narrative around Discord is that it's wrong. I believe it's completely false, but it was this serious, self-serious sort of dogmatic, and you're like, if you watch any footage, clearly it's people experiencing something together, joyously, right. and feeling the hope and the potential of what the ideas were in that room. That's my take on it, and that's what I took from it. Sorry to go on a little rant, but I'm just saying. I can see where Soulside fits into that too, like singing about hopeful things and change, but not in a scolding way is where I think things are coming from.
Right.
So
hopefully.
My understanding is that the band ended as things end when teenagers start to enter adulthood. And Scott, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think school stuff happened, and then people are coming back from school and trying to figure out whether they wanted to have careers or keep going to school. Around that time, Soulside, that formative period for all of you around the same age, is that why Soulside kind of ceased when it did? Just that mix of life changes?
Yeah, I think in my recollection, we had actually all been going to school and taking breaks off and to do the band. And actually around 1989 or 88, actually, we really took a full year off.
Yeah.
And we were really, really active, touring all the time. We were writing songs, and we got invited to tour in Europe. When we were out of Gilman Street, we met some people from this label called Concurrence from Netherlands, which had done a bunch of stuff with DC bands. We got invited to tour in Europe, so we did that. And I remember talking to Hetty Swartz, the person who was running it, on the telephone. All these things were back on a telephone. She's like, you want to tour Europe? Call me up. So I called her up, and she'd be like, you guys still want to tour Europe? I'm like, yeah. Well, she's like, how long do you want it to be? I just said, as long as you can make it, It turned out to be like 3 months. It was a really, really long tour. And we wrote a lot of not all of it, but some of the music for the last record that we did, Hot Bodygram, during that tour. And it was a pretty grueling tour. Mm-hmm. We were really focused and committed to the music and things. But as you were saying too, I think we were just at that age where I think that we were starting to just having different thoughts about artistic things. Like I was going to move to New York after the tour, and I did move to New York after the tour and go to film school. And I wasn't even really thinking about doing music after that at that point. I mean, it felt like going to Europe was like a huge pinnacle for what our band could achieve at that time. Because this is also still, you're going around and around and around to Green Bay and all these great places to play punk shows, and the shows are getting a little bit bigger, but nothing's really changing that much. I mean, you're still living in a van, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Yeah. And it's kind of like, okay, even though you're very young, you feel like an adult when you're 22 or whatever. So you kind of feel like, okay, maybe I'm done with this for a while. I mean, that's kind of how it felt to me.
I think externally, it can be telling when a core group of a band leaves and starts playing with someone else. Alexis, I guess the world, who followed Obits, had this experience when Rick Froberg decided he didn't want to play anymore. The three of the members, I think, ended up being in a new band called Savak. I think that's accurate, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if, Alexis, you're some sort of universe focal point around this idea of one person leaves or you don't want to play with them anymore, so the three of you play with another. But what I'm getting at, obviously, Alexis, is you, Scott, Johnny, Soulside stops, but you end up playing in a new band together still with Eli. That's Girls Against Boys. So I don't mean to bring up old business, but was there some friction between the three of you and Bobby, or like what was the parting at that point? And eventually, and very soon, we're going to get to why you're back together, I hope, as well. But Can we just hit up on that? Because like I say, just narratively, it's curious that three of you
continued
would keep playing and be like, peanut butter and jelly's fine for the three of us. That's okay.
And to put salt in the wound, Scott, Johnny, and I played in a band with Mike Fellows from Rites of Spring, Happy Go Lucky, for a little while.
That's right, of course.
A song called Little Baby, which, by the way, is now #1 chart-topping band, rapper, I guess.
That's right, Little Baby, yes. Controversial rapper, yes.
We're waiting for that settlement because we had the name first. But we did that for a little while, and then we started doing Girls Against Boys. And that was a project that Scott and Eli had started. And so they had done some really cool stuff that was... Because everything was shifting, we were getting more into stuff like Ministry and Skinny Puppy and Tom Waits and stuff like. Our focus was shifting a lot to very non-punk stuff. So Scott and Eli started this sort of. It was like more of a kind of a dance project. And then we went in and started. Johnny and I joined them for the second half of that record, for the remaining 3 songs on that record that we recorded much later. I think it was about 4 years between the first recording and the second recording, right, Scott?
For Girls Against Boys.
Yeah.
But
I would say that there was like a lot of friction between all of us, and I think that 3-month tour, like we had grown up a lot, and from for the 5 years or whatever. And I think that we were starting to feel the political angle of it was starting to feel kind of restrictive. And I think on top of it, having a 3-month tour was really hard to do. It was just really hard to, be in a small van with the 4 same people for 3 months or whatever. So I think by the time we got back, we were like, all right, this is enough.
Yeah, fair. I get it. I don't imagine there's much more to say on that aspect of things because it's water under the bridge, and you seem to have overcome whatever was going on almost 30 odd years ago. Yes. Good work on that, by the way. Yeah, that's good. Scott, can we talk a little bit about why Soulside is back? And within that, can we talk a little bit about what you make objectively of this new record you made together? Maybe what's changed about the band, these sorts of things. Let's begin with why. Why are you guys back together, do you think, Scott?
I think it happened gradually. Soulside getting back together. I think that in a strange way, it kind of began like that. We played. We mentioned some documentary movies that came out. The movie Salad Days came out about DC, and it was kind of a moment when we'd all been talking and thought, oh, maybe we could reform and play the kind of party for that show, which we did in DC. And we just did that a few times and really just felt this connection between us all was still just as strong as ever. And just being together was and playing this music again actually felt, it was very interesting for me because over the time with Girls Against Boys, I started using more like guitar pedals and different things like that. And this was like going back to like a really physical form of playing guitar, which I actually found that I hadn't done in so long. I really enjoyed. It took me a while to get back in that space. So many things, kind of artistic things started to gel, and the friendships definitely were still strong. And then the pandemic happened, and it was really Johnny who was kind of instrumental in saying like, hey guys, let's jam on some songs just virtually. We started sending ideas to each other, and it just exploded basically. And I remember when we started doing that, I heard Bobby singing and stuff on the new stuff. We'd done a few songs before, but we did a 7-inch before this new album came out. So that was already there. Like I felt like Bobby's singing was phenomenal, and it's so cool to hear it again. But even in the writing process of this record, I was really blown away by all of our musical ability that we've had for years. But it's sort of, we still lock in together, and like Bobby's singing on this record totally blew me away. Both the content and the content, the emotive nature of it, and how timely it is. It just started all flowing together in a very exciting way.
Very, very sort of poetic. I mean, I know that's an obvious thing to say about lyricism, but he does seem to be in a good space as a writer, I find. again, singing outspoken songs, but with such a empowering and hopeful tone that I find, like you say, I think it's quite necessary right now. The anger is there, but I can hear the kind of resolve as well. So that's just my take on it. Alexis, sort of similar questions. Do you want to talk a little bit about whether you feel the sound of the band has changed radically from when you were younger and last playing together? And within that also, can you speak to what Scott and I were just discussing about where Bobby might be coming from your perspective, rather? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I would say just for me, the Hot Bodygram experience for me was pretty meaningful. And I continue to think of those experiences being in Europe and recording that record as super meaningful to me. And I was pretty nervous to touch that again because I didn't want it to suck, basically.
Yeah.
You know? But it was the same. We did these shows with Bobby, and it was really good to see Bobby. I haven't seen him in a long time, and I've known Bobby since I was in second grade. And just to play, just to mess around, play some stuff, and just have it sounds cool, and to push on with that. And lyrically, I think Bobby's done an amazing job. I mean, I think there's a combination of both a lot of very political stuff and a lot of very emotional stuff that definitely resonates with his experience, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
His experiences that he's just going through in life, with relationships and stuff like that, which is great. But I'm also, like we're fairly politically minded bunch of people, and it's been a pretty wild ride for our lives, but definitely for the past 6 or so years, it's been pretty wild. So I think it's refreshing to go back and approach, music with this sort of in this way. I think this is the way that Soulside was. We were, it was Reaganism and all sorts of things that were going on politically at the time. And I think it was good to speak out about those things. And I think it's good to speak out about them now. And I think it's important. Yep. So I'm happy that Bobby is willing to take on that. It's a tough thing to be taken on. And Bobby happens to be willing to be the lightning rod for that, which is pretty bold, Yeah.
Yeah. And then for those who dig into the record, you will hear that contemporary resonance, I think, but there's a lot of history and historical precedent that he's kind of using to inform his own personal take on things. And I think they are very personal lyrics, as much as we're talking about how he's dealing with sort of universal experiences, both from let's say the past 6 years. But like I say, I think he's, as I alluded to earlier, I think he's also using his experience with Rastafarianism to try to make sense of what's happening right now and how people are behaving. So it's really I would say a rich and textured display of lyricism and singing. Music's fantastic. You guys are playing, like, I love the guitar parts. I love the drumming. The bass is neither here nor there. No, I'm just kidding. It just comes together in this sort of really beautiful and compelling sound. I allude to the fact often on the show about how my family listens to all the stuff I am listening to in preparation for these things. And I'll tell you again, as I've said to Alec Mackay and others, my son is digging on this record a lot, which surprised me. Because I will say my biases, and my wife's as well, we came up in the, born in the late 70s, both of us, sort of formative time in the 90s. And when I first started to play this record, it's like, this is very 90s. And I'm like, I don't know exactly what that means, but I kind of do. So it seems like you're drawing upon what was probably a formative time for you guys in your adulthood as well to capture and play the way you're playing. Is that a fair assessment, Scott?
I think exactly. That's a very fair assessment. I kind of think this record picks up in a way, Hot Bodygram as a record kind of expressed, for me anyway, our bands or my frustration with being pigeonholed in this like punk rock only hardcore scene situation. I wanted to just do weirder stuff when I wanted to play for adults or whatever, and I think that Hot Bodygram is this kind of record with a lot of tension in it and with great results, which doesn't always happen, but it's great results. And I think that in a way, as Alexis was saying, this was a powerful feeling moment for us with the Hot Bodygram record. And I think a lot of that energy that we brought into this new record.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of both. It's kind of like there's some really cool '90s elements, as your son picked up on. I hear
no,
too.
sorry. Just to be clear, my wife picked up on those. My son was not around in the '90s, born in like 2011. But we listened to so much different music that I think he was just like, this is such a distorted guitar, like just like it was a rock band, and some these days, like it's just unequivocally a rock band, and these days, even the rock bands that I'm listening to have synthetic aspects or synthesized aspects, I should say, or there's some treatment, and he was like, oh, this is just a rock band. So every time I press play on the music, he's like, oh yeah, this band. Oh, this is great, and he sings along to the first couple of songs for sure, and he's into it. Cool. They're into it, and I haven't heard much from my daughter. Don't take that as any offense, but my son so far
that really annoys
me. I will say just to tout Scott blows whatever that Johnny and I were really pushing for doing this stuff, and we were sending tracks back and forth, and then Scott. You know, when we would go back and listen to Hot Bodygram, the guitar playing on that record, I think, is so insane. Yeah. It's so cool. And then for Scott, I think we felt like when Scott delivered these tracks, it was like, he's back. You know, because Scott is he's a great guitar player, and the stuff he does for Girls Against Boys, I think, is awesome. But it's also a little bit hampered by what he can sing along with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with Soulside, he could do whatever he wanted, and it was like there's a couple of songs where he's like, I don't have a part for this, I'm just going to make noise over it, and I love it. It's great.
For what it's worth, I think it's all very remarkable. So congratulations on it. I can feel the joy in at least 4 dudes coming together again, and you can hear that in it. I think there's. I don't know. That's my take on it. So I just want to say that without rambling too much further, that, congratulations and thank you for coming back. Scott, can you talk a little bit about future plans? I mean, I know the record is going to be out for, as we're speaking, A Brief Moment in the Sun will be out, I believe, November 18th, 2022. On Discord Records. Yep. Beyond the release, I see that there's plans for whatever plans are worth these days. There are plans for tour dates and whatnot. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. We're planning right now a run of U.S. dates that will happen in March of next year, 23. I mean, if plans, we'll see what happens with plans. Yeah. But U.S. and Europe, we're really committed to the idea of doing everything we can to tour on this album. And again, I think it's in a cool space because it's not really about only trying to make money or something. It's about I kind of look forward to some situations to bring Soulside into that could be a little cantankerous or a little bit weird. I mean, we're an older punk band now. It's kind of fun to play around with where we could play, what we could do. So we'll do that in the States, and then we're going to follow by doing stuff in Europe as well, where I live now. And so we'll do some dates in Europe, in different things. We're planning to tour some. We're planning to play together. We're planning to really support this record.
That's great. No, that's awesome. Alexis, I'm sure it's probably too early to say, but does this renewed activity suggest more collaboration, more songwriting? I guess you might see how touring goes and whatnot. I'm putting words in your mouth already. Sorry for this leading question. But do you have a sense if everyone might want to keep doing this?
I mean, I would imagine so. It's just a little tricky to do it, but the way we did it before was, I mean, it was kind of amazing. I think there's a lot of records that have come out through the pandemic with a lot of artists staying home and writing new records. And it's actually one of the amazing things about it is, when you're a band, your first record is generally your best record, and then your second record is sort of like whatever's left over from your first record, and you throw some new songs in. Your third record is terrible, and so on. So we had the joy of not having that rush of, you write some songs and you got to follow it up right away. We just sat on these songs for however many, for a while, which was great. But I would, it was a really great process. There was a lot of bonuses to doing it this way, which was that I could spend, a month coming up with a beat instead of making Scott listen to me play drums for a month trying to come up with a beat. It's great,
And smashing the cymbals right in my ears.
Yeah. And smashing the cymbals right in Scott's head. I also want to say for us that being on Discord is just such a great thing for us because we love Discord. We've always been super, super psyched to be part of Discord, and the fact that they're willing to put out these new records. I mean, they have a rule that if you don't live in DC, you're not on Discord Records, and they're breaking that for us, which is so great because we love Discord, and it's just phenomenal to feel like we're welcome back. Just such a nice feeling.
I was recalling this with Alec Mackay recently, and I kind of from memory, and I realized after that I could be wrong, but from memory I suggested that in the mid to late 90s, that rule that you describe started to soften a little bit, and that bands not quite in DC. One of my favorite bands on Discord is Hoover, and I think they're from, I forget where they're from, Virginia or something. Well, sorry, this whole area is a bit weird to me, but I don't think are they from, anyway, it doesn't matter. I was just speculating that the DC rule was starting to soften in the mid to late 90s. Am I wrong about that, Alexis? Was I wrong when I said that to Alex?
Well, there was some. The Scream was from Bailey's Crossroads, so they were okay because that was sort of like the DC metropolitan area. But then there was Lungfish, which was from Baltimore.
Right.
They were the big outlier.
Okay. Okay. I think
but yeah. I think that Discord has to kind of soften their. Well, they don't have to, but they kind of soften the rule because they realize that like a lot of people have to move.
Yeah, I mean,
out of DC, it's too expensive.
I think they have put out records by people who don't completely live in DC anymore. Maybe there are DC expats. Anyway, we don't need to get into this. Has become a Discord board meeting, and I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, guys. No, that's great. I think it's great that Discord is here to support you still, and all those sorts of things. And it's a lovely succession of events, if I may say, that you guys are back and making records and all that stuff. Scott, if people want to learn more about Soulside and this new record, using the tools we currently have at our disposal, I don't know if Twitter is going to exist by the time we put this episode out, but I will obviously link to as many things as I can to the Discord website. I just wondered if Soulside has its own internet existence that you wanted to direct people to.
We have Facebook and Instagram, but especially we have Bandcamp,
right?
Discord Bandcamp with Soulside. So I think it's Bandcamp Soulside. I think.
Okay, thank you, Alexis.
Soulside DC, yeah, right.
Okay,
yeah, that's where to go. Alexis is the mastermind behind.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Back to what you were saying about the different members of bands. He's back there taking photographs, filming things, and he does all the social media, so we don't even know what's happening.
I feel like I have benefited personally from Alexis's ardent social media pushes. So thank you, Alexis, for liking things and sharing them. It does mean a lot to me, and thank you for doing that. Okay, so people can figure out Soulside stuff again by those platforms we mentioned, and also, like I say, I will link to various things in the podcast description. If we can go out on a song from this new album, I wonder if you guys can pick one. Now, when I have more than one person from a band on, two things happen. One, I ask one person to pick. The second person has veto power. So if they don't like what the other person picked, there's a tiny debate. It goes to a parliamentary review, and then we determine what the song is that we're actually going to hear. So I am going to go to Alexis to pick the song. Scott has veto power. Alexis, can you pick a song from the new album and tell us why you chose it? I'm
going to go with... what's that song? Well, I guess I'll go with Times Like These. I have a bunch of favorite songs from this, but Times Like These I really like I like everything about it. I think it's a cool arrangement. Scott's guitar is great, and I really like Bobby's vocals, and of course Johnny. He's okay. This is the
lead track on the album. This is the one that gets my son's heart a racing, his mind a revving. Scott, do you concur with this decision to go with Times Like These?
I was going to veto just to be contrary, but
yes.
Yeah, I will. But I will go with it. I think the song Times Like These. Even also, this was one of the songs that Bobby actually kind of demanded to be the first song on the record. And I think it's because the way it introduces the record, it kind of sets up the listener for what they might find on this record, which is kind of this song has a very Hot Bodygram feeling in a way, because I sing some backup vocals that are kind of different from Bobby's train of things, and and that kind of thing creates tension and stuff. I think it's a perfect song for listeners, old and new, to kind of get the flavor and feeling of what this record's really about through and through.
Would you say, Scott, that this song is perfect for times like these?
I would say, yeah, times like these. Actually, I was thinking like times like these. The title I was okay. Because times like these is also a lot of. There's a bunch of songs named times like these, but we all know this from publishing that we could have called it Yellow Submarine, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you can't get rights to a song title, so you can title your song anything you want,
right.
As long as it's the musical part. So we could have called it, Baba O'Reilly, or whatever. But
right.
It's not so much the title. It's just it's what's in there. It's so hopeful. And then you also have me kind of singing like living in the ether, breathing in. It's kind of like there's a danger to it that is so much hot body grab and so much what life feels like now.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be positive. You can feel positive and hopeful, but at the same time, we feel like there's a lot of, dragons basically right around the corner, that we gotta fight.
It has it has an infectious but ominous quality. I would agree. And
right.
So I okay. So we have no veto. We're going to go with it.
I was going to say you can dismiss Parliament.
Yes.
If you want.
No, we don't need them. Everything's fine. From the excellent new Soulside album, A Brief Moment in the Sun. This is Times Like These, possibly in parentheses Yellow Submarine. And I just want to say, Scott, Alexis, thank you so much for making time for me. It's very meaningful to have you on and have you back making music together. So thank you for this. Best of luck with all future endeavors, to quote a Savak reference there. I think I did. Right. I think I just did that. And I hope we speak again soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Never seen times like these before. It's like a kind of love that some would adore. The kind that wrenches and twists your gut. Twist and shout. The kind, like I said, that some would rebut. Something to that blood. I've never seen times like these before. It's a chance to say goodbye to a war that you did more. It's been refused. It's been refused. It's like a man. We can fall in love again. If you refuse, it's yours to lose, but it's a moment when we can finally not be used. I've never seen times like these before. Old childish whims are now folklore. Got a little distance from my hometown. Twist and shout. And now I'm surrounded by bears and clowns in a tourist town. They got money to spend on dining out. Twist and shout. Get a little drinking and start to shout. They may say it's a little tough love. And aren't we all just a little bit smug? It's like a gateway drug. It's like a gateway drug. If you refuse, it's yours to lose, but it's a moment. We finally have the power to choose. Time to recuse people who don't take cues.
suffer just as you do in your school. We must get ready for many other dangers that are around us all the time.
There you go. You got a little taste of the new Soulside album there. That's the first song, as you heard me say there. The first song, Times Like These, from their new album, A Brief Moment in the Sun. Kind of a noisy ending there. Did you hear that? A little noisy. It's a noisy, interesting record, and I'm so pleased that I got to talk about it a little bit with my guests today, Alexis and Scott from Soulside. Thanks again for appearing on this, the 732nd episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available wherever it is in the world and however in the world you get your podcast. If you can't find an episode that you've heard about and you're looking for it, or if you want to learn more about me, sign up for my monthly newsletter, which I actually sent out recently. As per the monthly part, I get behind on things. Anyway, I sent one out. Sorry. What was I saying? Oh yeah, you can learn more about all those things at vishkhanna.com. You can also like Creative Control on Facebook, and if it still exists, you can follow the show on Twitter at Vish Creative, or you can follow me directly on Twitter and on Instagram at Vishkhanna. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to support the work that goes on with this podcast. That is the primary source of revenue. That is the revenue that makes me happiest, if I may say. It's not icky like any of this minimal advertising that you may hear every once in a while. And it's from the listeners, right? I mean, it means a lot to have you donate. Now, $6 American or more a month grants you access to exclusive content, which includes receiving the episodes earlier than everybody else. It also means you get some bonus content if I spend some time with my guests after we finish the sort of formal, proper interview, if you will. Sometimes I dig into my archives and I find interesting things that from my past preceding this show and all those sorts of things. Anyway, I know some of you don't even care about these frills. You just want to support the show. So I appreciate you doing that. In return, if you're interested in receiving a Creative Control t-shirt in either the maroon or yellow designs, I still have some. Just message me on Patreon. Again, you can learn more about all of these things at patreon.com/Creative Control. Thank you. Thanks again also to the fine Alberta record retailer Blackbird Music, with locations in Calgary and Edmonton, Alberta. And you can learn more about them and order things from their website there at blackbird.ca. Also want to thank Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario for their in-kind support for this show. Thanks as always to my dear friend Jim Guthrie for lending me some music that I can use on the show. You can learn more about Jim at jimguthrie.org. And finally, thank you so much for listening to this episode with Soulside. I hope you'll go to discord.com and learn more about their new album, A Brief Moment in the Sun. Thank you for subscribing to this podcast, following it, telling your friends about it. All of that helps if you can help spread the word. And otherwise, just thank you for listening to this. I will talk to you very soon, I hope. Bye for now.